Okay, we're live. Hi everyone, welcome to the live stream. My name is James. I work at Affinity, primarily as a software developer nowadays, but I have a background in producing learning content for the applications, demoing them to businesses and other interested parties, that sort of thing. So the new version of Affinity is here, and I'm really keen to show you some of the new functionality that we've been working on. Now, I will primarily focus on the non-AI feature set. So that's the core functionality that you get for free. And being that I am predominantly an image editor and photographer, I'll be looking at the pixel-based features. Also, slightly selfishly, I'll be going through some of the features that I developed, mainly because I'm comfortable with them and how they work. Well, you would hope so. And I am quite excited to showcase them. So with that in mind, the first thing I'm going to look at is the glitch filter. So let me just, I always use live filters where possible, so I'm going to add the live implementation of the pixel menu here. Okay. So the glitch filter started life as a quick way of achieving chromatic aberration effects. So ironically, photographers try and do everything they can to minimize aberrations, whereas creatively we might want to sort of add them back into imagery. So the first thing you have here is the distortion aberration, and if I start to drag the slider up, you'll see it kind of separates out the three RGB color channels like so. Now, being a distortion, what you can also do is you can drag on the document view to set the origin of the distortion. So let's put it roughly here, okay? And you can go negative as well. You can kind of punch it away from you almost rather than pinch it in. And you've got additional controls here, so you can change the channel ordering. So that's the order in which the channels are scaled, because you see each channel receives a slightly different scale, so you get that pop effect where they're separated. So that was kind of like the genesis of the glitch filter. And then I just kind of built it out from there. So you've got the offset method as well. So rather than an actual distortion, you can kind of just shift the channel planes like so, okay? And previously in V2 or V1 of, say, Affinity Photo, you would have had to do this by maybe duplicating the pixel layer you're working on, separating out the channels, and then applying like a transform offset to each channel individually, or a lens distortion to each channel. So there's a lot of manual work involved. You can make a macro out of it, but it then became destructive in effect. So this is much easier. You can just go back in and control the effect anytime you want, really. Okay, so that's fine. You know, that's it kind of started out there, but then as you can see, there were quite a few options here that I then added. So let's look at a different example, and I'll take you through one of the other slightly crazier glitches, which is shred. So let's add a glitch filter. I'm going to drop it into the triangle group here. You just see that there. And let's use, it's shred, isn't it? There we are. Okay. So this basically takes the layer and it just displaces it in opposite directions based on the pixel spacing option down here, as you can see. So hopefully, as I'm just demoing this without me needing to explain, this is all very live and responsive. I don't know if any of you have tried to do glitch effects in other image editing software, naming no names, but it's quite a drawn out and convoluted process. Whereas this really is kind of, it's designed to be as quick and accessible as possible. So I might go for a vertical slice like that and just do something a bit abstract with the design. I didn't think about doing this actually, but there's also blast. I'll just talk about this briefly actually, because I'm quite a fan of this. So blast is, it's like that pixel dripping effect. I believe to get that sort of effect in, again, other software, you would use like a wind filter, but it would only blast in one direction, and then you'd have to rotate the layer and all that sort of business. This is literally just, you don't have to repeat the wind filter, you know, umpteen times or whatever. You can just drag a slider and say, I want to melt my pixels by this degree. And then you've also got the stagger, which it kind of randomizes which pixels are pushed. So you end up with more of a semblance of the original layer or image information behind the effect. So I just wanted to kind of showcase that as well, because I thought that was quite cool. You've also got light streaks, which again is quite simple. It just kind of renders this light streak effect on the layer. The glitch filter works particularly well with layers that have alpha, so it perturbs the alpha, as you can see. I mean, if I were to, say, do blast again and check preserve alpha, then you'd end up not perturbing the alpha, which is not really what you want in this case. So this filter will perturb the alpha by default. Okay, I just wanted to show you a few more examples as well. This is kind of like my indulgence almost. I have made some tutorials on using things like the glitch filter, but they're kind of very concise and focused, and they go from A to B to C. You know, here's the basic filter, here's how to use it with such parameters, here's how to use it with the filter brush. This is me getting to kind of play around a little bit, so hopefully you'll bear with me. And just, you know, hopefully give you some ideas about the ways in which it can be used as well. So for example, in this composite, I've got this fire layer here. I might add a glitch to it, and I might go for something like waves. Yeah, I love that effect. So yeah, again, waves is a separable, what I call a separable channel effect. So it applies different parameter scaling to each channel. And it's just a really cool effect. I think you can change the number of channels that are being manipulated. So you can make it a little bit more subtle if you just want the red channel being perturbed. But I'll go for all three again. And again, you can change the channel ordering at any time, and it's just really fancy to see it working like that. But then you end up with this interesting effect at the end of the day as well. One thing that people started using it for, which I hadn't really thought about, to be honest with you, but it actually makes a lot of sense, is text. So you don't need to rasterize the text or anything like flatten it to a pixel or a raster layer. You can just apply a live filter to text, and then you can also change the text whenever you want as well. So for this, I might apply a fuzz glitch. Okay, and just zoom in here so you can see the effect clearly. So actually for this, I might go for something more subtle and maybe take the number of channels down and perhaps go for the blue channel. So you end up with this nice sort of blue fuzz effect over the text. But of course, because again, it's non-destructive, you can actually change the text as well. Like I can just type hello and have that instead. So you can change the text while the effect is rendering over the top of it as well, which is quite nifty. I'll just see if there's anything in the chat so far. Yeah. New live filters are spectacular. Yeah, thank you. Although live filters have been a thing since version 1 of Affinity, just wanted to point that out. I think we just kind of made them a little bit more obvious now as well. So for example, recently there was a change where if you apply a filter via one of the tools on the left, so for example, if I go into the compositing studio, if it has a live variant available, it will apply that. So for example, if I were to select the glitch tool from the tools panel, it will apply the live version, which is really quite cool. And it's another way of exposing live filters to the end user, which is really what we should be doing now. You know, there are equivalent to non-destructive smart filters, essentially. But, well, I would like to claim anyway that they're a bit more intuitive and easier to work with, hopefully. Yeah, okay, let's move on then. So we'll move back to the Pixel Studio, and I think, which order will I do these in? Yeah, again, text. You can apply to groups as well. So if I group the 4 text layers I've got going on here, I can then apply the glitch filter to the group. And yeah, I might experiment again with that waves effect. It's kind of a little bit more subtle here, but you know, you get that nice sort of channel separation going on, although it's perhaps, again, not as noticeable, probably because of the composition going on. But then there's also warp, which is quite funny. I love doing this to people's faces, even though it's a bit silly. So warp, you can just kind of warp a layer like that, and then you've got the vertical warp as well. The key thing comes into when you start playing with turbulence, so that's how it gets really interesting. So you start off with a very subtle warp, and then gradually, as you increase turbulence, it gets a bit messier. So maybe somewhere in the middle, something like that, or, just a little bit of warp on the text. Again, that's all non-destructive, so there's still text layers, which means I can go in and change the actual text copy at any time. I just want to kind of really bring that home as well. Pretty much everything I'm doing is going to be non-destructive. I will call out when it's not non-destructive. There are some things that we have to do destructively, but they're few and far between, fortunately. Yeah, that was basically it. I just wanted to point out a few things with the glitch filter. There's so many different combinations and permutations. I would urge you to kind of maybe watch the video tutorial, because that goes through stacking multiple glitch filters as well. Oh yeah, there's a comment there which I can probably take. Why do you always seem to choose live filters from the menu rather than the layers panel? It's just habit. It's literally all it is. There's no real in-depth reason, to be honest. It's the way I do it. It's the way I've always done it. It just makes sense because I'm working a lot on the document here. I don't know if it's to do with me being left-handed. I have no idea, but I just find it more intuitive for me to go up to this menu, go here, rather than go all the way over here and click this button here, where it's actually kind of collapsed as well, so you need to scroll down it to get the thing you want. It's easier for me to just go boom, 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 and get the thing. I could create shortcuts as well, but I don't know. This is the thing that we always have to fight against, is that everyone has their own little mannerisms and idiosyncrasies when using this software, and that's mine. So sorry there isn't a more complex answer. But yeah, okay, so next thing I wanted to do was look at the adjustment brush. So you'll find that in the Pixel Studio here. So it's kind of, there's an adjustment brush in some other software I won't mention. And that's fine. So we added a few more things just to kind of make it a bit more functional. But yeah, changing layer opacity, that sort of thing, being able to change the blend mode, and then also you get the real-time preview as well. So as you hover over your document, you can see the effect the adjustment is going to have. So all of these are nice little tweaks. But actually, rather than do anything really dramatic and extreme, I'm actually going to give you what I hope is a more practical example of, say, retouching a photograph or something like that. So I'm going to choose curves, and I'm going to start by brushing over the sky detail here, and then I'll let go. It brings up the curves dialog, and tweak that a little bit, maybe just take the highlights down. Okay, so kind of darkened the sky a little bit, added a tiny lick of contrast. But then what I'm going to do is click Add Adjustment to add another curves adjustment, and I'm just going to brush into the path down here. This is where I want to lead the viewer's eye, essentially. So this wants to be kind of prominent, that the highlights want to really sing, and that sort of thing. Excuse me, something like that. And then I'll add a third adjustment and brush over here. And this I perhaps, I want to make look a bit matte, a bit lower contrast, maybe darken slightly actually, something like that as well, just to draw the viewer's eye away from that area and more towards the path. So now if I hide these curves adjustments, you can see the before and the after. So it's not a huge dramatic change, but it's just tweaking tones in a more subtle way to kind of guide the eye a little bit. What I might also do though is maybe go back to the brush and get the selective color, and I'll just zoom in so you can see this. Just brush onto the foreground there, something like that. And just to give this area a little bit more of a colorful pop. Maybe not too much actually, so I'll kind of experiment with the opacity until I find a nice balance, something like that. Okay. Yeah, so that's perhaps a little bit more of a restrained use for the adjustment brush. There is another thing that I want to show you. It's the way it's integrated with the adjustment panel, which houses all of the adjustment presets. Okay. So I can show this panel by going to Window, Pixel, Adjustment, and it will pop out over here. Okay. And this is hopefully what's a really cool thing, is that it automates a lot of this, if you're trying to just figure it out for the first time, or even rather selfishly, if you're trying to demo it, or if you're trying to do learning content on this, right? Doing something like painting onto an adjustment mask, you have to cover how to add an adjustment layer, how to invert the mask, which is simple enough, but it's another step. Then you've got to get the paintbrush tool. Then you've got to increase the width, and you've also got to take the hardness down to 0% because you want a nice soft-edged brush application when you're masking. And you've got to cover all of those steps, and especially for a new user who's maybe not that, when I first started using image editing applications, I stayed away from kind of brushing, masking, brushing, all of that business, because I associated that with being an artist, and I'm really not an artist at all. And I stayed away from it for a long time. And so you approach it from the view of a new user who's got to pick up all these tools, okay, what's this tool do? How do I change the paintbrush parameters and all the rest of it? And it kind of boils down to, we need to kind of make the process as simple as possible. So one of the things that I should explain about the adjustment brush is that when you switch to it, your primary and secondary colors over here, if I can see them, I'm not blocking them with the webcam. No, okay. They get reset to white and black. So you get set to white by default. So you're always painting onto the mask. The default brush width is actually appropriate. If I just reset it, you'll see it goes to 1024 pixels wide, which is bigger than your average brush. Your hardness is also set to 0%. So you're all set up for the adjustment masking process. And it can kind of take this a step further. So if I've got the view tool active, and then I perhaps go into, where are we? Selective color. And I want to use the gold and yellows preset. Now, if I click this, it just adds it to the whole document. Okay. However, it doesn't matter what tool I've got selected. If I then hold Option on Mac or Alt on Windows and click this, I get, we call them toasts because they pop up. The adjustment preset was added with an empty mask, paint to apply the effect. Okay, all right, fine. So it's already selected the adjustment brush for me. Therefore, the color is set to white for me. So if I had it set to something else, it'll be changed to white. And now, all I have to do is just paint where I want that adjustment to apply. And that's it. It's really simple. Again, I could close down. I could switch to a different tool. I could have even the pen tool active. I could be working with different colors, like, let's swap these colors out, perhaps do something like that. Okay. And then if I want to apply another adjustment selectively, I might go for curves. Let's go for S curve stronger. Option click. And can you see down there? It's swapped me back to white and black. So I've got my masking set up. I've got the adjustment brush selected. And then I can just paint into the sky to enhance the contrast. And while I'm here, I'll probably go for HSL as well and option click for desaturate and then paint into there to desaturate the sky. Okay. So these are all just little micro attempts at making kind of the image retouching processes a little easier to use, or at least giving people alternatives that are hopefully more straightforward. Once you know how to do them, of course, that's always the key thing, is the education, right? There's the before, there's the after. Okay. So now that I've done that, let's go on to the filter brush. So one of the things that we do have, obviously, people have probably hopefully found it already, is live filter layers, right? So naturally, if you've got the adjustment brush and you've kind of got most of the code to handle that, it's not a huge jump to say, well, why don't we just do that for live filters as well? And that's what we've done. So I'll show you one example here. Car in the clouds. This is a really old render now, but I use it for so many things. Filter brush tool. So it's just under the adjustment brush here. And we can choose which filter to apply. So all of these are available live. I will go for motion blur. Okay, and then just brush in like so to apply some motion blur just to the cloud detail. Okay, like so. And then I'll just demonstrate this actually. So if I went over part of the car and I didn't mean to, what you can then do is hold Option or Alt to switch to erase mode. So there's no need, for people who are kind of familiar with the masking process, there's no need to switch to an erase brush just to erase away from a mask. If you're using either of these tools, you can just hold Option and that will erase for you. Okay. The one thing I need to do actually with this filter is protect the alpha because it's perturbing the edges here, you can see. So I'll go to Edit Filter up here and just check Preserve Alpha. There we go. It will leave the alpha alone. Okay. Now the other thing I might do on top of this is probably stack another one. So let's go for Bloom. And maybe we'll do it over the car this time. So the Bloom filter, just make things nice and punchy and glowy. There we are. Let's go in and edit that and see if we can tweak this a little bit. Yeah, okay, maybe just to really, it kind of softens it, but it also makes it punchier as well, which I quite like. There we are. Yeah, I mean, another thing we could try is combining a filter with a blend mode. So you get a live preview of that as well. So if I switch to pixelate and then maybe use something like a lighten blend mode, let's pixelate the car. I'm just playing around here, just experimenting for a kind of a glitchy effect. That's interesting. The good news is that if you think, actually, no, that's terrible, let's get rid of that, you can just either undo or just delete the pixelate filter that we've got here. Just delete it. There we are, job done. So no harm done. Okay. Again, just to give you some different ideas about applications for this, I had a nice one here where I thought, ooh, the foreground could use a bit of glow. So again, rather than having to apply a live bloom filter, invert it, get the paintbrush tool, set the color to white, paint onto the mask, even just describing it sounds like a headache, right? Get the filter brush tool, go for bloom, and then just paint onto the foreground, like so. Or the other thing you can do, which I haven't actually covered yet at all, is while you, before you paint, if you hold down Command or Control, then it switches to alternative parameters. And for the bloom filter, this uses the other methods. So there are two. There's contrast and bright. Bright is more desaturated, but it gives you more like a diffuse glow effect. So I can hold down Command and paint on instead. And that gives me a very dreamlike look to the foreground there. So again, just giving you some ideas here for ways in which you could experiment with this, use this. Here's another fun one as well. Filter brush tool, select the glitch filter, and then you get a second combo box. So you can choose which glitch to apply, and these all have alternative parameters as well. So if I go for aberration distortion, the other cool thing about this is that as you hover over the document, it will set the origin of the distortion to where your cursor is. So you can determine where the origin is, which naturally for this would probably be in the middle here, and then I can start painting, and once I've done that, it will set the origin. Again, if I accidentally brush into the foreground detail here where I don't want it, I just hold Option or Alt and subtract away, and there we are. Then I can click Edit Filter and play around with the strength. I probably want to preserve the alpha if I'm going, there we are. You can also do bidirectional, which will invert. Just take preserve alpha off, there we are. That will invert the second channel, so that'll go in the opposite direction. So you can end up with even more crazy psychedelic effects with this if you want, but I'll probably give that a miss for now and maybe just experiment with just the channel ordering. There we are. So hopefully, I know I'm just kind of whizzing through this. I've got a lot to cover, but I just want to give you some ideas, get you a bit excited about, oh yeah, that's given me such a, inspiration to do X, Y, Z. Okay. Multi-band sharpen. So we're veering more into less flashy territory now, but hopefully image editors will appreciate this. So Multiband sharpen. I predominantly looked at this for astrophotography, and I'll demonstrate why in a second. But also it's great for lunar photography as well. So instead of using unsharp mask to sharpen this, I might use multiband. And don't worry, because also in the next example, I'm going to cover a comparison between unsharp mask and multiband, so you can actually see the differences clearly. But for something like moon photography, where you maybe want to kind of flip-flop between fine detail enhancement and broader detail enhancement, this is great because it gives you a lot of flexibility. So if I start to drag the radius up, you won't really see a great deal, probably not on screen share, unless you're really paying attention. But then if I start to increase the number of bands and the band range, you'll then see a lot of enhancement going on. Okay, then I can increase the contrast further, although I don't particularly like increasing that too much for moon images. Maybe just leave it somewhere there. So if I just briefly explain what's going on, this basically performs multiple band passes, filtering passes. You can control the number of those using this option here. So you can go from 3 to 8. Just to preempt this, the minimum is 3 because it doesn't make sense to apply fewer than 3 passes. Otherwise, you might as well just use unsharp mask or high pass. Okay, so we start at 3, we work up to 8. And then the range essentially is the difference between the radius value of each pass. So you start with a base radius of, say, 1, and then with a smaller band range of 1, it might go, for example, 1, 2, 4, 8, 16. Okay, with a band range of 5, it might go 1, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, for example, that sort of thing. So this is how you get your broader detail enhancement. But for something like the moon image, if I just take the contrast down, you can see the before and the after. So I would kind of describe this as sympathetic detail enhancement. And just to expand on that a little bit, let me give you, probably, I'll go for this as an example. So one of the main issues that you might run into when you're working with HDR images is when sharpening, because they are composited in linear space as opposed to gamma corrected or non-linear space. And you'll probably notice that sharpening is one of the first things where it gets a bit, okay. I'll give you an example. So if I merge this layer, and I'll just do a destructive unsharp mask to it, so I've got like a comparison for you, I might go for something like just a radius of 1, maybe, and then increase the factor. Okay. So already, I know we're really splitting hairs here because I'm zoomed in quite far, but I'm very particular about this sort of thing. So you've got these really dark areas appearing around edge detail, and that's kind of undesirable. If you look at that, for example. So let's say I'm enhancing, maybe use a radius of 1, factor of 2, and click apply. Okay. And I'm just going to hide that for now. And then underneath, I will add a multiband sharpen filter. And let's go for a similar thing. Let's try base radius of 1, increase number of bands, and then use a small band range so that we're enhancing finer detail. Okay. So this is multiband. This is unsharp mask. You can see the difference there. So you've got very distinct black edging, black details, sorry, around the edges even. Whereas with multiband, you don't get that. Okay, there's multiband, there's unsharp mask. Okay. And so when it comes to when you're compositing in linear light, you might want to try using multiband for a softer application of sharpening. Again, I'll give you a great example here. So here's a one-shot color image of the Pleiades. And again, this is in RGBA 32, as you can see up here. So I will, again, just to do this comparison, I'll merge a pixel layer, and then I will use unsharp mask. And I need to get quite aggressive here for the level of sharpening that I need. So watch what happens when I start to drag the radius up. Look, you get the nasty black haloing excuse me, around star detail, which again is not particularly desirable. And you have to use quite a large radius for the kind of aggressive sharpening that you might want. And so as soon as you start to go kind of like above 3 or 4 pixels, you get it. There we are. Okay, so let me apply that. And then again, I'll turn that off. And underneath, I'll add a multi-band sharpen. Let's go all the way with this. Let's take the band range down, maybe the contrast up a bit. So even with higher contrast, you can see the difference already, hopefully. So here's unsharp mask. Look at those nasty, ugly black halos. And there's multi-band sharpen. So we're getting a similar level of detail enhancement, but without the artifacting. And again, I know it's, really fine detail because we're zoomed in, and you might argue, well, you don't really see it at one by one, but you kind of do. Look, you've got the black halos there, whereas with multi-band sharpen, they're not nearly as noticeable. So again, just uses for multi-band sharpen. I would encourage people to experiment with it. It's not going to be amazing for everything, but, more tools in your toolbox. Okay, the next one then, tone compression. Okay, so I'm going to give you 2 different examples of this. I'll just see if there's anything in the chat. No. Okay. Yeah, no, okay, right, I'll carry on for now. So I'll give you 2 different examples of this. One is just with a bracketed HDR merge, and then another is with a 3D render that's been rendered out to OpenEXR, so it's got HDR color values in it. So I'll start with an HDR merge, and I'll just go into my folder here where I've got my TIFFs. There we are. Okay. I don't need noise reduction, and I don't want to tone map HDR image. So what I'm going to do is a comparison between tone map, which is what we had in Affinity Photo V2 and V1, and tone compression. Not to make the argument that one is better than the other, but to show you how they can be different, and just to communicate really that you now have, again, a wider variety of results to choose from. So I'll duplicate that, and I'll tone map this duplicated layer. Now, this is another thing which I'll cover while I'm here. So obviously you've got Affinity Photo users going, where's tone map gone? Where's liquify? Where's develop? Yeah, so they're not in the studio list here. They're kind of like more like filters anyway. So you will find them, if I switch to the move tool and select a valid layer, you'll find them on the context toolbar here. You'll find them in pixel filters here. And you'll also find them on a right-click menu down here. So let's go for tone map. This is a 60 megapixel image, so it may take more than a few seconds. So I'll just fill the dead space somehow. Okay, right, we're done. That didn't take as long as I thought it would, actually. So, so we got the global compression going on here, and then we've got everyone's favorite local contrast, which of course gives you a specific look. I don't necessarily always go for that, but let's add a little bit. And then down here, I'll take the highlights down. And also, crucially, to make this look a bit better, especially the foreground, I will use curves like so. Just do something like that, maybe. Yeah, okay. Okay, so I haven't got there yet, right? So this is tone map. This is the old thing. We've always had this. Okay, so now if I go back to my unbounded image that needs tone mapping, I can apply a tone compression adjustment. Okay, and instantly you can see the difference there. And I've got some basic sliders up here. I didn't really provide many sliders for this because, frankly, it's more to get your image into a good starting place for further manipulation. That's the goal of this, right? But that said, there are quite a few methods to choose from here. So basic gives you a flatter, more colorful output, and then you've got natural, bright, contrast, filmic, They all kind of give you a bit more contrast, but the highlights are kind of a bit brighter as well. Punchy and PBR neutral, I wouldn't really recommend them for photography necessarily. They're more for 3D render application, but yeah, you can give them a go if you want. Log, then of course, actually just gives you a logarithmic transform. So if you want to apply your own tone shaping, you can do that. But I might go for something like basic, and I really like this. You can use color here to switch between, it kind of mixes between color preserving and just a basic compression. So if you want a really colorful output straight out the box, you can have that if you want. I'll go somewhere in between. But actually, yeah, should I go for, no, I'll go for basic. Okay. But the thing here is that then you can add additional adjustments. So maybe I'll add a bit more contrast into the image and just brighten it up slightly as well. Okay. So compare that to the tone map result, and you can see it's kind of different. Tone map is more effective in its compression, especially the local compression. Okay, you get a very distinct HDR looking image here. Whereas if you use tone compression, sometimes in combination with additional adjustments, you get what I would say is perhaps a more natural look, maybe. So really, it's kind of up to you stylistically as to what you want. We're just giving you more tools to play around with and achieve that. Okay, and now the other thing is, I did mention 3D renders. So here is one that I created in Blender, saved out as OpenEXR, and I've composited a couple of render passes on top of the base render as well, and then brightness contrast, because why not? And I've got all of these unbounded values here. So I can then use tone compression to bring them in range. And there we are. I get a decent looking result straight out of the box. Color preservation doesn't really, it kind of goes super saturated, but you lose fine detail there. Whereas if you take that to the left, you actually get that detail back. So again, experiment. Natural will probably give you a more natural rendition of brighter, saturated areas, more intense areas. And again, it's just a case of cycling through and finding which one you prefer, really, for your HDR tone mapping. PBR neutral, again, that's more suitable for renders as opposed to photography and that sort of thing. But yeah, I just wanted to point that out, that we do have that now. So tone compression and tone stretch, which I'll look at shortly, they are only applicable in RGBA 32 documents. They don't make sense to apply to bounded formats like 16-bit or 8-bit. So if you're wondering why they are grayed out, it's because you need to be in a 32-bit document to use them. Okay, just thought I'd nip that in the bud, so to speak. Okay. I kind of showed this off with the filter brush tool, but we've also got the bloom filter. I won't spend too long on this, but I will just show you. So one morning I was driving to work. I had my camera in the back of the car, and I just felt like, I was in a bit of a rut. I needed to do some photography, and I just parked in a lay-by on a major A road. And as I walked back to get to this little road off the side of the road, sun was coming up. It was misty morning. I just saw this horse in this field, and it was just like, oh, this just perfect moment presented itself. Yeah, technically the shot's not wonderful. I struggled to fill the frame with the horse. Didn't have quite the right lens with me, but never mind. But also, when I was looking for material to show the bloom filter with, I was like, this is just crying out for it. So if I apply the bloom, you get this lovely soft glow over the horse here, and then I can play with the, essentially, the filter always renders. So a common misconception with this is that if you turn all the sliders to 0, then it shouldn't do anything. That's not the case. It will still do something, you can see there. But this controls how aggressively it blends into the shadows, midtones, and highlights. So you can see, if I zoom right in, it's very subtle, but the highlight, you just get that extra bit of control there. Midtones and shadows you won't really see much of on this image. Maybe down there. Yeah, there we are. It kind of makes those areas a bit punchier down there. But it just adds this really nice subtle glow. Of course, You can make it stronger if you want. And then the bright method will be really kind of inappropriately aggressive with strong on anyway. So let's take that down a bit. But yeah, you can just get this lovely glow effect. Look at that, before, after. So yeah, I've probably overcooked this a little bit, but it's kind of, when you're actually just moving the sliders, especially when you're showing it to people, you're not kind of focused, you're not hyper-focused on the details. So I'm kind of exaggerating everything to make it obvious for screen share. Yeah, so that's the bloom filter. Like I say, I won't spend too much time on that. The other examples, I did have them queued up, but they pretty much just do the same thing. Hopefully you get the idea. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to look at was the quick adjustments panel. Okay, and I'm going to show you a couple of different use cases for this. The first one is essentially, sorry, this is really distracting because my main screen has the nighttime filter has started to be applied, so everything's gone orange. Whereas I was panicking for a minute, but it appears on the actual the mirror, the HDMI out, that it's fine. It's not changed, so that's okay. But yeah, it is a little bit distracting because everything has gone nice and soft and orange now on my main display. It might affect my perception somewhat if I'm manipulating tones, so do bear with me. But yeah, where was I? So quick adjustments then. Right, so there's two different approaches for this. And I would argue this was the main approach for implementing this perhaps, but maybe not. So let's bring the quick adjustments panel up. Okay, I see this as something for users who are not that comfortable with the concept of adjustment layers. They may be coming from a layout like a DTP background, and the concept now of being able to do not just layout, but also image, tonal manipulations in one piece of software might be a bit sort of, they've never had to do that before. Perhaps they've never, perhaps someone else did all that work and then they just laid out the final images. But now you've got the capability for somebody to make like a last minute final tweak on something that's on a layout. Okay. So this is like an attempt at having a user-friendly way to access some of those controls without being too overbearing. Let me give you an example. So let's say I'm laying out a photographic brochure, like a showcase here. And for this image, it's like, I don't know, for the sake of a layout, maybe I just want a bit more contrast. In quick adjustments, all I do is just increase the contrast slider, like so. Okay, and what it does is it dynamically creates an adjustment inside the layer that you're working on. The end user, if they don't want to know about that, they don't really want to fuss about that, that's fine. So let's say I click away to a different layer, the control resets. When I click back to that layer, the control sets itself back again to what that brightness contrast adjustment is set to. Okay. So it's non-destructive, which means you can go back in, if I come away and click onto a different layer, that effect doesn't get baked in. You can come back to that and you can change it at any time. That's key, but also it needs to kind of get out of the way for your average user, like your layout user who doesn't really care about adjustment layers. They just want to make some tonal manipulation before sending it for feedback and proof and so on. If you say you want to tweak the white balance, but then you decide actually, no, that's a terrible idea, I want to keep it as it is, you can just either set the slider back to 0 and it will remove the adjustment, or you can click reset here and it removes the adjustment. So no harm done, completely non-destructive. This owl image here, we might just want to sharpen it up a bit. So we've got a sharpness slider we can use here. You probably can't see this very well on screen share, so I will exaggerate beyond what I would do tastefully. And that creates a live filter, a live unsharp mask. Again, if I reset this, it just takes it away. So it's a way of having this non-destructive flexibility, but again, I'm just repeating myself here. The user doesn't really need to worry too much about that if they don't want to. Okay. We've also got some automatic options here. So for this puff in, I might use, we've got auto levels, contrast, auto colors, and auto white balance. I might use auto contrast just to see what that does. Yeah, it just makes the image a bit punchier. And again, that is just an adjustment that sits there in the layer stack. If I want to get rid of it, I can either delete it or I can go up here and choose reset adjustments. Okay, and then just a final example on this, with this massive panorama here. Shadows down, perhaps. I actually use this technique. This is interesting. So let's say I want some more contrast in the image. But if I use the contrast slider, it's a bit too powerful. Instead, I'll use shadows and I'll take them down. And it just darkens the shadow detail a little bit. Just helps draw it away from the highlights, creates a bit more contrast in the scene. And then also maybe I'll bring the clarity up, although that's far too much. That sky just looks way overcooked, so let's take that down. But again, all I'm doing here is creating live filters inside the current layer. So I can manipulate those at any time. It's totally live and non-destructive. Okay, now here's the other use case. So in my time experimenting with different workflows and looking at how people use applications for post-production, I watch a lot of Blender tutorials, and the prevailing thing for me is that they will take a finished render. They'll often just use gamma encoded files, so TIFFs, JPEGs. And when they go into their image editor of choice, they will use something akin to the camera raw filter, and they'll just make the changes they want on sliders, click OK, and that's it, job done. They don't really get too much into advanced compositing or you know working too much with adjustments and that sort of thing. So this is kind of I guess this is another use for quick adjustments, right? So if I were to go into the color grading studio, I'll just turn that on and move into it up here. I've got my quick adjustments panel, and let's say I've just rendered this out of Blender. It's a 16-bit TIFF file. I just want to make a few tonal tweaks to it to make it better for presentation. So I might use auto levels here. See what that does. Okay, fair enough. I might bring the white balance down a bit, and then the saturation up. And then here's the other cool thing, is that I might want to do some selective editing. So if I use the object selection tool and I make a selection of the pumpkin, any quick adjustments I apply now will be masked. So for example, if I bring the clarity up, it will just affect the pumpkin. You can see there. And then also I might just take the shadows down, and that just, so subtle, but I'll just deselect so you can see. It just adds a little bit of contouring around the edges of the pumpkin there. I quite like that. Just helps separate it a bit. But again, all of this is non-destructive, so I can turn all my layers off, see what I was working with originally, and then turn them back on like so. Okay, so moving on. We're getting into the really nerdy territory now, so apologies, but tone stretching. So this is specifically for astrophotography. I do apologize for other people who are not that fussed about astrophotography, but maybe stick around because it is interesting nonetheless. So when you work with astrophotography, a lot of the time you're working with very faint data, and you stack the data to average it out, increase the signal to noise ratio, and then you stretch it, sometimes quite significantly for darker objects or shorter exposures and so on. And yeah, whereas in V2 we had, and V1 actually, we had astrophotography stacking. For tone stretching, we just did this kind of rudimentary thing with a gamma transform and a curves, S-curve type thing. I think it was anyway, for tone shaping, right? So now, instead, when you stack, you'll get a tone compression adjustment added. I will simulate doing this if you've stacked in other software and you bring the linear TIFF or FITS file into Affinity for further editing. You won't have tone stretching applied. I nearly applied tone compression then. That would have been the wrong move. So tone stretch, like so. Okay, and instantly we start to see more of a result of the Rosette Nebula here. So we have several methods depending on what you want. You've got ArcShineH, got logarithmic, you've got structural. I just kind of named it structural because it seemed to be good at bringing out nebula detail, that sort of thing. And again, you've got the gamma manipulation, you've got the stretch factor. So maybe we'll go for, before I go for that, I'll just show you color preserving. Color preserving is better for one-shot color data or objects that don't necessarily have a lot of color or intense colors. Mono data, you don't tend to use much in the way of color preserving tone stretch. Tends to be for one-shot color data, tends to be for things like Orion Nebula, M45 Pleiades, that sort of thing. So there we are. It looks a bit garish with this false color composition. So let's go for ArcShineH, and I'll bring gamma and stretch factor up. And then something which I'm quite happy to have thought about really was the compression slider. So one of the main problems with stretching astrophotography data is that it has quite a significant dynamic range. So let's say you've got the Orion Nebula, you've got the nebula detail around, which is fainter, and then you've got the core, which is really bright. And that's a classic example because when stretching, you don't want to blow the core detail out, and yet it's really easy to do that. And you have to use iterative stretching, I think it's called, or progressive stretching, where you kind of apply one curve's adjustment after another to gradually stretch and try and avoid clipping highlight detail. So with the tone stretch, you've actually got this compression option here. So when it's all the way left, you do get a brighter image, but your star detail is, it's not clipped. That's the key thing. There's no clipping that occurs. It's all kind of, it's still compressed. But if you want to add more compression, you can do so by moving the slider to the right. And then you can see there, again, this is really splitting hairs, but you just gradually compress that detail down a bit. So again, experimentation is key for this, okay? Anyway, on top of this then, I'll tell you what, if we've got the time, I'll just do a full edit so you can see the process of starting with tone stretching and building it up to something that looks really nice. So let's go for brightness contrast. I'll punch brightness all the way up, bring the contrast up a bit, and then I'll add levels, and I'll just hold Option to visualize clipping. Maybe go for something like that, okay? At this point, what I'll also do is noise reduction. So let's add a denoise filter. Color noise, yep, I want a bit of that reduced, and then luminance noise, maybe not too much. Yeah, let's go for something like that, okay? So at this point, I do need to merge a layer down, or up rather, because I need to use the, where's it gone? Remove background filter. So you can remove gradients with this, but hopefully, at least, we don't have a gradient on this image. I'll just move the sampler somewhere to here, and then check sample color at handle. There we go. That'll knock the background out, but I just want to offset it a little bit, maybe to about there. So if I do a split preview, you can see, yeah, okay, it's not a dramatic difference, but what I'm also doing is eliminating any potential color cast of the background detail. So that should now be neutral. Okay, so now I've done that, I will add HSL, and yeah, I mean, I kind of want to keep the magenta color a little bit, but I might just take the edge off it, just desaturate it slightly. And then yellows, I will increase the luminosity. That has a really big effect. And then increase the saturation as well. Okay, you see we're getting there slowly. What else? Maybe I like to use selective color a lot. I use this so frequently. So let's take reds, cyan down for the reds and yellow up maybe. Yeah, something like that. That works quite nicely. And then on the blacks, I'm actually going to give it a little bit of a color cast. You have to be so careful because, again, we're in linear space here. It's very easy to do something quite dramatic like that. So I like to use the mouse wheel, nice little tip, use the mouse wheel on input fields to incrementally modify them, like so. So even just -1, we've got a bit of a difference there. Okay, see the before and the after. Yeah, on top of that, I might go for the filter brush. Let's see. Clarity, where are you? There we are. Okay, so let's enhance some of the structure in the middle of the nebula here. Yeah, an interesting little tip as well. If you're wondering where blend if is in Affinity, we have something called blend options or blend ranges. So if we go into this cog here, we've got this dialog called blend options, and we've got source and underlying blend ranges. And I can just take this down on the source one, and it's ever so subtle, but you see what it's doing? It's just blending that clarity filter layer out of the brighter areas. So we avoid overexposing the star detail too much. In fact, you can even make a nonlinear curve for blending it, something like that. There we are. Okay. And maybe the effect is still a little bit too strong for my liking, so let's take the opacity down, maybe to 50%, maybe 70, something like that. That's nice. And then back to the filter brush. Let's use multi-band sharpen, paint on just to the middle area. That's way too strong, so let's use edit filter. Let's take the base radius down, maybe to 1 pixel. Take the band range down and the contrast down as well. There we are, but it just sharpens it up nicely. Okay. And then a final thing. I'll tell you what I also do, I've started with a factory default layout for this live stream, but one of the first things I do in the Pixel Studio is I get the scope panel up rather than the histogram. I find having a spatial representation of intensity of the document of the image is much more useful than a histogram. And every time I look at the histogram, I think, you're so useless. Right, where's my scope? Okay. Although this is a linear scope, so yeah, just bear that in mind. Okay. Because we're in RGBA 32. Normally, if we're in non-linear, the scope would probably reach higher. But there we are. So let's bring the brightness up again and contrast up. And there we are. We have this final image. And if I hide all of these layers, you can see what we started with, which is very faint, virtually no detail apart from some stars. And we've ended up with that. So that's not bad, really, is it? And that's all started from being able to use this tone stretch adjustment. If I were to hide that and that, you'd still end up with that, you see. So there we are. Okay. So that has kind of covered the majority of the features. I'll just see if there's anything in the chat. It's probably, apologies, because the chat, I think, has gone by much quicker than it would have done in previous live streams. It's nice because obviously Affinity's gained a bit of popularity now, so I don't see any comments. I'll look through the live chat after, once it's published and everything, and I'll see if I can tag people in the comments and that sort of thing, if there's anything I can address. Oh yeah, the thin grey border. Yeah, so that is a bit of a, I guess you call it an artifact of unifying the three apps, because I believe Publisher and Designer have the border, whereas Photo didn't. So I know that some people will be, wondering about that. This is a bit controversial. I know that I have focused on the non-AI feature set, but I would be doing myself a disservice if I didn't at least cover, in some minuscule way, some of the new AI functionality, just because I actually think some of it, when used in the right way, is actually quite compelling. I'm not necessarily anti-AI. I'm skeptical of AI, and I don't particularly see myself using it a huge amount. But just, from testing the software and playing around, I found some interesting use cases. And I'll just show you one thing. You probably think it's really gimmicky. That's fine. Everyone can have their own opinion about it. But I like to use generative edit, not necessarily image generation to generate images from scratch, but selectively editing existing imagery. So I took this photo a few weeks ago. I was kind of starting this series where I take photos of local buildings and manipulate them to make them look really interesting and different. Okay, so one of the things I try, and I don't know how successful this will be because you get a different result every time, so bear with me, but I would duplicate that layer and use something like generative edit, and I would say make it nighttime with neon lighting. Okay. And this is, of course, a moment of talk amongst yourselves while it does all the processing. I'll just see if there is anything in the chat. Astrophotography macros, yes, they do all work fine. The Corley, sorry, your username. But yeah, they do all work fine. That said, I am updating them to take advantage of some of the new functionality in Affinity. So I'm on version 19 at the moment. Version 20, which I'm kind of working on in the background occasionally, it will have some nice new things, and some existing things will also be tweaked, especially like the live tone stretching now, because that's not necessarily needed to be done in such a manual way, because we now have the adjustment. I'll still keep the destructive tone stretch though, because the tone stretching, because that's really useful. Anyway, sorry. So we got our first result here. Okay, yeah, fine, whatever. But then what I do is I duplicate multiple times and I make multiple permutations of this. So make it nighttime with neon lighting. So I won't give it a color in the prompt. Let's see what it comes out with now. Okay. Whenever I select the move tool, a bounding box always appears, which is a bit annoying. Yeah, I get that, but then you could just use H for the view tool to not see the bounding box. Although I suppose what the goal is that you want to move a layer without the transform box. Okay, yeah, I see where you're going with that. I'm not a massive fan of that one. Let's try another one. Make it nighttime with blue neon lighting. Let's try that. Okay, I did say this is a real gamble because I managed to create a couple of really nice results earlier, but there is a bit of a randomization to it. Yeah, here we go. Okay, so I've got a blue one, right? That'll serve as a base for compositing. I'll try one now. Make it nighttime with lighting on the building. Okay, and this should give me more of a generic nighttime effect, but it should put lights in the windows, hopefully. If it does, I will celebrate, because we've got this nice circular window at the top of the building here, and it usually finds that and puts the light in it. Oh, it didn't this time. Damn. You see what I'm talking about up there? It's kind of... No, it hasn't really, has it? Let's give it one more... Let's give it another go at this. Make it nighttime with lighting on the building. Oh, this is typical. This is so. I did a bit of a run through of this because obviously, it's the one area that I'm less comfortable on, and I managed to create a really, first try. Okay, so it's done something different every time, which is kind of fine, I guess. Let's composite these. So let's start blending them together using something like screen, lighten, maybe lighten, screen. Yeah, screen, and take the opacity down maybe. So this is what I like to do with it, because one image on its own, yeah, not that wonderful. But when you start to composite them together, you maybe get a bit more value out of the generative edit functionality. Obviously, you can do more traditional stuff like, remove the person on the left or something like that, or make it winter. But here's one I made earlier, because I couldn't quite get the same result I wanted. Oh, I didn't get the light in that one either. Oh. There's another one kicking around somewhere where it definitely got the light in there. I promised, swear to you. But yeah, this is one I made earlier, and I added bloom and curves to it, that sort of thing. So I just found it interesting making something a little bit different, that sort of thing. I've got a few more. Where's another one I did? I think it was I used it in one of the tutorials, actually. I think it was quality of life improvements. Was it? Oh yeah, I did something really different. So I used remove background as well. I think this is a stock image, possibly, of the cosmic sky. And then I had this lighting in the building there. So for compositors, actually, I wouldn't completely discredit the use of AI. It's really, sometimes you struggle to find a particular image, or to manipulate something a certain way. And if AI can help with doing some of that heavy lifting, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. Even generative image, if you're compositing images together and you're kind of having a manual artistic input in that, I still think there's value there to AI. Generate more than one at a time. You can, if you're doing image generation, you can generate up to 8 at one time on this option here. Or if you're using generative fill as well, then you can generate images. And also if you're using generative expand, then you can generate multiples as well up here. So there is quite a lot of functionality there to explore, but there we are. So yeah, I didn't quite get the result I was after this time around, but never mind. I just, it was important to kind of bring that in because I wanted to, again, give people ideas about things. Yeah, I was just going to cap off with a basic raw edit just to kind of bring it right back, maybe kind of assure, especially Affinity Photo users, because traditionally they would kind of just go for Affinity Photo. They're not that bothered about vector design. They're not that bothered about layout. They just want a solid image editing application. So to that end, I was just going to do a basic image editing workflow, in which I'll do now. So recently I've been down to the river to get some birds in flight, that sort of thing. So got Canada goose. They are absolute menaces, Canada geese, but I've got a soft spot for them. So here's a raw file. I don't tend to do much with my raw development. I'll just take the highlights down. We are working on some more, I think I can probably say this, expect some expansion of raw capability in the future. We know it's been a lacking area. It's something we're working on. Okay. So again, I do most of my image manipulation in, I was going to say the photo persona, but it's now the Pixel Studio. Okay. So the first thing I do with a lot of my images is I mask and I separate foreground and background. So I'll get the object selection tool and make a selection of the goose. But actually, again, I try not to veer too much into AI territory here, but I'll just show you, because object selections sometimes struggles with the finer detail, like the tips of the wings here. If you do have a Canva Pro account, you can use the remove background and select subject features, which are actually, they use the same functionality. It's just that one uses it as a raster selection mask instead. So if I use select subject, you will find it is virtually flawless for 99% of imagery. If I just quick mask that, look at that. It's done a great job, I think, matting the feather detail to the point where I can just kind of use it as it is. So I'm going to rapid fire now. Curves, invert selection, curves, HSL. So I essentially create myself 3 adjustments to desaturate the background. You can see there. Darken the background. And then sometimes I won't actually brighten the foreground. Sometimes I will just keep this here, doing nothing, so that I can command click the mask and get my selection back. And what I might do now is at this point just add some sharpening. So I'll use multiband. That's the other thing I didn't explore actually with multiband sharpening, is that it's a really nice complement to if you've already sharpened your image. So we did some sharpening in Develop initially with Unsharp Mask. It's really nice if you layer it on top as like an extra layer. I'll use that word twice. An extra layer of sharpening. So there we are. Maybe something like that. Low band range. Maybe take the contrast down. So yeah, it's just really subtle, you see there. Maybe just increase the base radius a bit. But it just adds a little bit of extra detail. The other thing I'll do is command click the background mask and add a live denoise filter. So you see all this background noise here. Let's get rid of that. Oh, and take detail down. There we go, get rid of that. Job done. I denoise backgrounds for 2 reasons. One is because high ISO imagery I'll want to denoise anyway. The other is for compression efficiency. So, you take an image like this where really a lot of this background detail is not meaningless, I would say, but, it's okay for it to be denoised and fairly homogeneous in terms of the fine detail profile, that sort of thing. So if you take all the noise out, it compresses better. It's more efficient when it comes to compressing to a lossy format like JPEG. Even lossless, if you're using lossless compression, it will compress more efficiently. So I use that as a principle for all of my imagery. If something doesn't need to have noise, then I will denoise it because it will compress better. Sometimes texturally things should have noise. So again, it's, you should always consider that. But yeah, that's something I do. What else shall I do? Let's do selective color. Maybe just make it slightly more autumnal, perhaps, something like that. I'm having to look across at my mirrored screen because my night shift screen I can't trust it anymore. Yeah, that looks okay. Yeah, that's fine. And then maybe just curves, just give it a bump in the midtones, that sort of thing. And crop. See for the crop tool, drag out a crop, something like this. I'll turn on snapping as well, so I can crop to the bottom bounds. Okay, here we are. All right. So, I just kind of wanted to finish on something like that to almost maybe reassure people, yes, it is this new app. Yes, it's free. All of the core functionality is free. I know there are always going to be arguments about, you have to register a Canva account and they're going to put things behind a paywall in the future or whatever. We want people, you can watch the videos, you can see the arguments made and that sort of thing. We want people to have access to all of this core functionality. Like, that's us, right? We want that. We want to be able to ship you really cool stuff in the future and have it just pop up one day and, I can use this now. That's the goal. Because we want as many people as possible using Affinity. That's not a bad thing, And we want, obviously one of the goals is that you take your professional designers within, say, a firm or a company, and then they scale everything with Canva for everyone else in the company, whereas Canva is more user-friendly, it's easier to use. So that whole integration thing going on, obviously there's future plans there, but in terms of all the core functionality, you've got a load of stuff that's come free with the new release. We're unofficially call it V3, I suppose. It's the AI stuff that obviously has server-side costs and so on. You pay a Canva Pro subscription fee for that. That's fine. If you don't want AI in your application, just turn the studio off and then you never have to look at it. It's as simple as that. And you've just got all of your fundamental editing technology here ready for you to use. Anyway, on that note, this is pretty much the end of the stream, but I will just point something out because it's a bit of an in joke. It's a bit of fun. If you go to the help icon in the top right, I've just seen a few comments about this already. Yes, my surname is Ritson, and yes, this AI help bot is named after me. The reason being, it's not an ego thing. Well, I hope it's not anyway. We've had a bit of a running joke within Serif for the past, since V2 launched. I did a What's New for V2 video, and I was very nervous facing the camera, and it made my presentation marginally unnatural, and I have a weird cadence to my voice anyway, especially when I'm trying to deliver the same line, 20 times in a row, and I'm scuffing it up and I'm getting frustrated and I'm nervous and I can feel like my head twitching and, my neck feels like really tense and stiff and all the rest of it. And I think it was on dpreview.com. There was a news article announcing V2, and someone said in the comments, this is great, but in the What's New video, has anyone noticed that James, the presenter, is actually an AI creation? And it started this whole thread of comments with people sort of picking apart my appearance, the presentation, my speech patterns and all the rest of it. And of course, we had a great laugh about that internally, posting a screen grab of all the comments and all the rest of it. And yeah, I will admit, when I was doing all the YouTube videos for V2 and so on, I became a bit too fastidious about word perfect speech, delivery. And then also I started doing something which was a terrible idea now, but at the time seemed logical, taking all of the breaths out and all of the little mouth noises. So breaths in between sentences, little clicks in the mouth, that sort of thing. And, 3 or 4 years ago, maybe that was okay. But the problem is that AI voiceovers are now so prevalent you can watch a ton of stuff on YouTube, especially YouTube Shorts, where you've got a narrator, and it's so painfully, obviously AI, and it really grates on me. And then in all the Affinity video tutorials, I started to see comments gradually appearing like, no, don't use an AI voice, use a proper voiceover. Or, you're taking work away from voiceover artists, or any combination of that sentiment, basically, like, stop using AI voices, or I hate this AI voice, and so on. And so it really got to me. And so the video tutorials that I'm doing now, I'll actually leave in the imperfections, like the breaths in between sentences and that sort of thing. But anyway, that's a long-winded way of, this is how we ended up naming the AI help Ask Ritson, basically, because it's a big in-joke about me being an AI, just an artificial machine with no soul and no feeling, no emotion. You can ask it anything. In fact, my favorite thing to do is ask it in the style of somebody, usually Christopher Walken. So I could say to me, well, I suppose that's accurate, actually, isn't it? I could say to myself, talk to me about the glitch filter and answer me as Christopher Walken. Okay. Let's see what it comes back as. This is a bit of a playful fun. You can ask, yeah, so there you are. I won't try and butcher an impersonation of Christopher Walken. But yeah, there you go. You can see it does it in a suitable Christopher Walken dialect. But yeah, you can ask it virtually anything. It's it's trained across multiple sources, and we update it. And also we have this flexible thing where if we start to see a lot of queries, or we can basically update it very dynamically. So we can kind of be very reactive if people are really struggling with something and they're trying to get help with it. You've also, by the way, also got the help panel here. So it's just at your fingertips, basically. But yeah, there we are. I'll just see if there's anything I can address. Yeah, the background removal feature and the select subject as a result is just, it's really, really good. Clippy. Yeah, I remember Clippy. Yeah, very fond memories of Clippy. I was about to say not so fond, but to be honest, he never really bothered me. I kind of missed him when he was removed, but there we are. Okay, so again, it's probably a lot for me to address now, but yeah, I've got to log off, I'm afraid. But thank you very much, everyone, for sticking with me. Yeah, yes. A lot of people probably do still think my voice is AI. In fact, in some of the new videos, even though I have gone to great lengths to still tidy them up but leave imperfections in, I've still got people saying, "Oh, is this an AI voiceover?" So yeah, I just can't win sometimes. But anyway, yes, I am going to have to leave it there. Yeah, for some of the questions, I'll try and get to them and post them in the comments. But for anything else, you can probably, this is really facetious, ask me in the app. Ask Ritson. Or ask on support channel, Discord. I know people are lamenting the loss of the forums, but yeah, a lot of us are on Discord. And there's a nice section for Ask the Community, that sort of thing, where you can ask queries as well. And you get a lot of feedback there. So, thank you your intelligence isn't artificial. Well, is that a compliment or not? I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, thank you very much, everyone, for watching. and hopefully see you again soon. Thank you.